The champagne glass shattered against the wall, not with a gentle clink, but with a sharp, angry explosion that silenced the entire restaurant. Shards of crystal rained down, catching the candlelight like a burst of furious stars. My hand, still clenched into a fist, trembled not from fear, but from a rage so pure and hot it felt like molten lead pouring through my veins. Robert, my husband, or what I now knew him to be, flinched back, his face a mask of shock, then quickly, anger. He had been laughing, a shallow, false sound just moments before, talking about our beautiful life, our 30 wonderful years. The words were like acid now, burning away the last thin veneer of my composure. This wasn't a quiet dinner. It was a battlefield, and I, Eleanor Vance, was done playing nice. His eyes, usually so practiced in their charm, now held a flicker of something raw and exposed: fear. He started to rise, a question forming on his lips, but I cut him off with a guttural sound I barely recognized as my own. My voice, usually soft and melodious, was a low growl, vibrating with years of unspoken hurt. The whisper from the restroom, "Your husband drugged your drink," had been the match, but the tinder had been laid over decades. This was the true story of resilience boiling over. Every ignored sigh, every dismissed opinion, every time he made me feel small and insignificant, it was all fueling this moment. This wasn't just about a poisoned glass. It was about a poisoned marriage, a poisoned life. He tried to recover, a nervous chuckle escaping his throat. "Eleanor, what on earth? It's our anniversary." His voice was laced with that patronizing tone he always used, the one that said, "She's just being emotional, she'll get over it." But this time I wasn't just being emotional. I was being real. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on his, ignoring the stunned silence of the other diners, ignoring the frantic waiters. This was a survival story not just for me, but for the woman I was meant to be, the woman he had tried to erase. The air crackled around us, thick with unspoken accusations and years of hidden truths. "Anniversary," I echoed, my voice rising, no longer a growl, but a chillingly calm declaration. "You dare speak of an anniversary, Robert, when you tried to poison your own wife? When you've been poisoning my life for years?" The words hung in the air, a public accusation that made several diners gasp. His eyes darted around, suddenly desperate, seeking an escape route from the spotlight I had thrown him into. He hadn't expected this. He had expected me to be sweet, forgiving, maybe a little tipsy from the drugged champagne, easily led home. He had no idea the fire that burned within this quiet Black American grandmother. This wasn't just some angry outburst. This was a lifetime of quiet dignity rising up. This was about infidelity stories and betrayal stories I had pushed down, tucked away, trying to keep the peace. The subtle hints of other women, the late nights, the unexplained absences. I had always rationalized them, always found an excuse. But the stranger's whisper, confirmed by my own quick thinking to swap the glasses, had ripped the blinds from my eyes. The bitter taste of realization was far more potent than any drug he could have slipped into my drink. This was the moment of reckoning, a cheating revenge unfolding in front of a stunned audience. Robert finally stood, pushing his chair back with a scrape that echoed in the quiet room. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. You've clearly had too much wine." His voice was sharper now, his attempt to regain control. He gestured dismissively, trying to paint me as the hysterical wife, a tired old trick. But it wouldn't work this time. My blood was singing with a defiant energy, a freedom I hadn't felt in decades. This was a real-life story of a woman pushed too far, a narrative that demanded to be heard, not swept under the rug. "Wine," I scoffed, taking another step closer, my shadow falling over him. "Or perhaps just enough clarity, Robert. Enough clarity to see the man I married for what he truly is, a snake. A coward." My words were precise, each one landing like a slap. I saw his jaw tighten, the charming mask beginning to crack and crumble. The restaurant remained silent, every eye fixed on our table, witnessing a raw, unfiltered drama they couldn't have paid to see. This wasn't just my story. It was a testament to every quiet strength, every unspoken struggle, making it one of those heartwarming stories of resilience, even amidst the chaos. He lunged forward, not towards me, but towards the table, sweeping his arm across it. Plates, cutlery, and the remaining untouched champagne flute crashed to the floor. "Stop it, Eleanor. You're making a fool of yourself." His voice was a harsh whisper, laced with desperate fury. He wanted to silence me, to drag me out of there, to put the lid back on his carefully constructed lies. But the lid was off and the steam was rising. This was my moment, a voiceover to the unspoken pain. A moment for my audio stories to finally find an audience. "A fool," I countered, my voice regaining its calm, chilling resonance. "No, Robert. You've been making a fool of me for years. Of our children. Of this entire community." My gaze swept across the stunned faces of the other diners, some of whom I recognized from church, from neighborhood gatherings. They were witnessing a raw, unscripted scene that would become legend, a real-life drama, far more captivating than any fiction. This was not just personal vengeance. It was a public declaration, a piece for Reddit revenge stories or family revenge stories that would shock and resonate. He grabbed my arm then, his grip tight, his eyes burning with a desperate, animalistic anger. "We are leaving, Eleanor. Now." He tried to pull me away, but I stood my ground, immovable, a rock in his turbulent sea. His strength, once a comfort, now felt like a desperate attempt at control, a final gasp of his power. But his power over me had evaporated the moment I chose the untouched glass. This was a relationship story's unraveling in the most public and brutal way possible. "Oh, we are leaving, Robert," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "But not together. And not on your terms." I wrenched my arm free, surprising him with my sudden force. His hand slipped and he stumbled back just slightly. In that brief moment I saw it, the flash of pure, unadulterated fear in his eyes. It was a victory more satisfying than any revenge, a true glimpse into his soul devoid of its charm. This was the essence of a grandma revenge story. A quiet, underestimated force finally unleashed. The waiter, a young man who looked terrified, finally found his voice. "Ma'am, sir, please. We'll have to ask you to leave." I barely heard him. My eyes were still fixed on Robert, dissecting him, seeing him for the first time without the veil of love, or even habit. He looked smaller, weaker, his carefully tailored suit suddenly ill-fitting. His expensive watch ticking away the moments of his downfall. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an exorcism, a cleansing of years of unspoken resentments, a sweet revenge short story come to life. I stepped away from him then, taking a deep, fortifying breath. My chest still heaved, but the raw, trembling fury was beginning to settle into a cold, hard resolve. "There's more, Robert," I stated, my voice carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. "Much more. This little anniversary surprise tonight was just the beginning. I know about the will. I know about the house. I know about everything." The words dropped like bombs, one after another, shattering what little composure he had left. His face went utterly blank, a mask of utter disbelief and dread. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out, just a strangled gasp. The revelation about the will, about the house, my mama's house, was the gut punch he hadn't anticipated. He thought his secrets were safe, buried deep beneath layers of deceit and my supposed ignorance. But I had been digging quietly, patiently. A grandmother takes revenge story time that would soon become legendary in our community. The fight was far from over. It had just officially begun. I turned my back on him then, facing the stunned diners, my head held high. My gaze met Ms. Green's, the newspaper editor, who had just entered the restaurant, drawn by the commotion. Her eyes were wide, but in them, I saw not judgment, but a keen professional interest. She nodded slowly, subtly, a silent acknowledgement that she was ready to hear my voiceover true story with a twist. Robert's face, when I glanced back, was a canvas of pure terror. He knew. He finally knew the extent of my knowledge, and the unyielding force he had just unleashed. This was the start of his karma stories, and I was just the messenger. The crash of that champagne glass against the wall in the restaurant echoed not just through the stunned dining room, but through decades of my life. Robert's horrified face, as he finally realized the depth of my knowledge, was a mirror reflecting years of my own quiet pain and the blind trust one had foolishly given him. That night wasn't an isolated incident. It was the explosive culmination of a meticulously crafted deception, a house of cards built on my dreams and his lies. You see, on the surface, our life had been a picture of the American dream, especially for folks like us, two black kids from humble beginnings who'd worked hard and made something of themselves. We had the big house, the well-respected positions in the community, the seemingly perfect family. But like so many love stories, ours had a hidden chapter, one filled with dark ink. Looking back, the signs were always there. Subtle whispers I chose to ignore, gentle nudges from my intuition that I brushed aside for the sake of peace and the illusion of a happy marriage. Robert was always so charming, so smooth. He had a way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even when he was quietly manipulating everything around you. He'd tell me, "Eleanor, my love, you worry your pretty little head too much. That's why I handle the finances. To protect you." And I, foolish woman that I was, believed him. I poured my heart into our home, into raising our two beautiful children, James and Sarah, into my work at the community center, always believing I was doing my part, building a life together. This was the true story of resilience in the making, though I didn't know it then. My sister, Clara, bless her insightful heart, saw more than I did. She often had a way of looking at Robert that spoke volumes, a silent knowing in her eyes. I remember one Thanksgiving years ago she pulled me aside. "Eleanor," she'd said, her voice low, "Robert, he's too good at charming even himself. Be careful where you put your trust." I had laughed it off, told her she was just being overly protective. Clara loved me fiercely, but I dismissed her words as mere sibling concern. Now her words played back in my mind, a chilling premonition that I had tragically ignored. Clara, always the pragmatic one, had spotted the cracks in Robert's polished armor long before I was ready to see them. My children, James and Sarah, adored their father. Robert was the fun one, the one who took them on adventures, who bought them the flashiest toys. He was the one who always had a grand plan, while I was the steady anchor, the one who cooked the meals, stitched the clothes, and dried the tears. They saw him as the successful provider, the strong patriarch. I didn't begrudge him that. I genuinely believed we were a team. I worked hard too, often taking on extra shifts as a nurse to cover unexpected expenses Robert would always frame as temporary business setbacks. I wanted our children to have everything, to never feel the pinch of poverty that we had known growing up. This was a survival story in progress, one where I unknowingly built a comfortable cage for myself. There were so many small instances, like pebbles accumulating in a stream slowly blocking the flow. The time my mother passed, leaving me a small inheritance. Not a fortune, but enough to fulfill a dream of mine, to start a small scholarship fund in her name. Robert had talked me out of it, gently, persuasively. "It's safer in a joint investment, my dear. Protect your assets." He'd smiled, so reassuring. I had trusted him, handing over control. I now knew that money had simply vanished, folded into his schemes. Or the constant subtle put-downs, disguised as jokes about my naivete when it came to money or my simple tastes. He made me feel like my intelligence was limited, slowly chipping away at my confidence, making me believe I needed him to handle the important things. These were the early chapters of the infidelity stories and betrayal stories that would later engulf my life. The deeper I dug after the restaurant incident, the more I understood the subtle, insidious nature of his control. He didn't just hide things, he manipulated my perception. He created a reality where I was the cherished, protected wife, too delicate for the harsh world of finance. Meanwhile, he was systematically stripping me of my autonomy, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. The financial statements I had glanced at over the years, the ones he'd quickly snatched away, suddenly made sense. The large, unexplained transfers, the sudden business trips that lasted weeks. I had swallowed every lie, every excuse, because I wanted to believe in the man I had married, in the life we had built. This was more than cheating revenge. It was an awakening to a deeply woven tapestry of deceit. My pain wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. It was the pain of knowing that the person who vowed to protect and cherish you was actively plotting your ruin. It was the realization that my life, for decades, had been a performance, with me as the unwitting lead actress in a drama orchestrated by my own husband. He had made me a bystander in my own life story. The quiet humiliation of that truth was a far deeper wound than any financial loss. This wasn't just a real-life story. It was a deeply personal testament to the insidious ways trust can be eroded. Then there was the house, my anchor, my sanctuary. My mama had poured her heart and soul into that house, a legacy passed down through generations of strong Black women. Robert had insisted on putting it in both our names, a gesture I had seen as a testament of our enduring partnership. I had smiled, touched by his supposed commitment. But now, after the stranger's warning, after Maya's quiet digging, I knew it was a calculated move. He wasn't just taking my money. He was trying to steal my very roots, my inheritance, my history. This discovery unleashed a fury that burned away any lingering doubt or sorrow. This was my mama's spirit, now coursing through my veins, refusing to let him win. This was not just a heartwarming story of overcoming adversity. It was a fiery account of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The true weight of his deception began to reveal itself not just through documents, but through memories. I recalled a particular argument we'd had about his new investment opportunity, a shadowy real estate deal that seemed too good to be true. I had expressed my doubts, my gut telling me something was off. He had dismissed my concerns, calling me too cautious, too worried. Now I understood. He wasn't just investing. He was liquidating, converting our assets into something he could control completely, easily. And the key to that control, I now understood, was ensuring I was too worried or naive to interfere. The silence of the night, the privacy of my own home, became the stage for my internal audio stories, playing back every suppressed memory. The realization that Martha, his quiet, seemingly sickly sister, was involved, was a true story with a twist that nearly broke me. Martha, who I had often helped financially, who I had nursed through various ailments, who I had always seen as a gentle, if somewhat frail, soul. She had played the long game, whispering in Robert's ear, feeding his greed, convincing him I was a barrier to their shared fortune, a fortune I was unknowingly funding. It was a betrayal so profound, so cold-blooded, it made the blood run cold in my veins. This wasn't just a simple grandma revenge story. It was a complex web of deceit involving those I loved and trusted. I thought of all the times Martha had visited, always bringing a small, thoughtful gift, always asking about my health, feigning concern. Her eyes, I now remembered, held a calculating gleam, a subtle shift when she thought I wasn't looking. She was the quiet orchestrator, the puppet master pulling Robert's strings. The kind deeds I had extended to her, the compassion I had shown, were repaid with the cruelest deception. This revelation fueled a different kind of anger within me, a colder, more deliberate fire. My initial rage at Robert began to morph into a quiet, simmering resolve aimed at them both. This was the dark heart of karma stories beginning to beat. The quiet suburban life I had built, the one I cherished, was a lie. The comfortable routine, the shared laughter, the anniversaries, all of it had been a carefully constructed facade designed to keep me docile, unaware. I felt a sudden fierce protectiveness for my children and grandchildren, knowing they too had been living under this shadow. I couldn't let Robert or Martha take away everything I had worked for, everything my ancestors had fought for. My mama's house, my legacy, was not just property. It was a symbol of my lineage, my strength, my spirit. The thought of losing it, of letting them win, was simply unbearable. This was the profound lesson of these narrated life stories. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought against those closest to you. The warning signs, the red flags, the instincts I had ignored, now screamed in my mind. Every casual remark from a neighbor about Robert's new business partners, who seemed a bit too slick. Every unexplained expense on the credit card statements that Robert would quickly whisk away. They were all pieces of a terrifying puzzle, and I, the supposedly naive wife, was finally putting it together. The image of the charming, devoted husband shattered completely, revealing a man driven by greed and a chilling disregard for my well-being. This was truly one of those fascinating moving tales that makes you question everything. I realized then with a terrifying clarity that my silence, my gentle nature, my unwavering trust had been misinterpreted as weakness. They had seen me as a docile lamb, easy to lead to slaughter. But this lamb, this quiet grandmother from the south side, had steel in her spine and fire in her soul. The gentle waves of my life were about to become a raging tsunami. The time for being silent was over. The time for being underestimated was finished. Robert and Martha had woken a sleeping giant, and they were about to feel the full force of my righteous indignation. The stage was set for an exciting narrative, one where the underdog would finally roar. This was the moment I stopped being a victim and started becoming a force. The anger that had simmered for so long, then exploded in that restaurant. now settled into a cold, hard resolve. The scattered pieces of my life, which once seemed like random misfortunes, began to click into place, forming a horrifying picture of calculated betrayal. It wasn't just Robert. It was a twisted web, an organized scheme designed to strip me bare. My mind raced, replaying conversations, re-examining gestures, seeing the knowing looks I had once dismissed as innocent. My gut clenched with a mix of fury and sickening realization. This was bigger than just a husband's infidelity. It was a deep, dark conspiracy, a true story of resilience that was about to get even darker. The first person who came to mind was my cousin Thomas. He'd always been a slippery character, smooth-talking and always looking for a quick buck, but I'd always seen him as more of a nuisance than a threat. Robert had brought him into some business ventures over the past few years, and Thomas had suddenly started flashing expensive watches and driving a fancy new car. He'd always been overly enthusiastic about Robert's genius, praising his financial moves to anyone who would listen. Now I saw it for what it was. A carefully constructed show, designed to deflect suspicion and validate Robert's shady dealings. This was a survival story that now included confronting not just a betraying husband, but a treacherous family member. I remembered a family reunion just last summer. Thomas had cornered me, asking pointed questions about my mama's house, about my plans for it, about my assets. He'd couched it in terms of helping me manage my future, but his eyes had been too eager, too hungry. I had brushed him off, told him I wasn't worried about such things, that Robert handled everything. My stomach churned as I recalled my foolish trust. I had given them all the answers they needed, painted myself as the perfect, clueless victim. The sheer audacity of their plotting, happening right under my nose, made my hands tremble. This was shaping up to be one of the most chilling infidelity stories and betrayal stories the family had ever known, but with a financial twist. And then there was Brenda, Robert's longtime secretary. She was always so polite, so proper, but now her behavior replayed in my mind with sinister undertones. I recalled dropping by Robert's office unannounced a few months ago, hoping to surprise him with lunch. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard hushed voices. Brenda's voice, then Robert's, talking about liquidity and the deed. When I pushed the door open, they had both jumped, startled. Brenda's face had gone pale, and she'd stammered about a confidential meeting. Robert had quickly ushered me out, explaining it away. I had thought nothing of it then. Now it screamed. She wasn't just his secretary. She was his accomplice, a silent partner in his cheating revenge against me. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying speed. Robert hadn't just changed my will. He had systematically stripped away our joint assets, moving money into offshore accounts, taking out loans against the house I had inherited from my mama. The home I had poured my life into, every memory, every celebration, every quiet moment, was being collateralized, used as a pawn in their greedy game. The thought of losing Mama's house, the very ground my family had stood on for generations, filled me with a cold, desperate fury. This wasn't just a real-life story of personal pain. It was an attack on my heritage, on my ancestors. I started to go through old documents, the few I could find that Robert hadn't hidden. Bank statements, property deeds, old insurance papers. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Large sums of money transferred out in chunks, always just under the radar, that would trigger a red flag. Signatures that looked subtly off, but similar enough to pass a quick glance. I saw my mother's name, my own name, attached to loans and agreements I had never seen, never signed. The audacity, the sheer contempt he must have had for me, was a bitter pill to swallow. This was far more complex and cruel than any simple heartwarming stories I used to share with my grandchildren. The deeper I dug, the more layers of betrayal I uncovered. It wasn't just financial manipulation. It was a psychological game. Robert and Martha had cultivated an image of me in the community. The sweet, slightly scatterbrained wife, too trusting for her own good. This perception served their purpose perfectly, ensuring that if anything ever came to light, people would dismiss my claims as the ramblings of a confused old woman. The whispers, the knowing glances I'd sometimes catch from church members, the subtle changes in how certain friends treated me. It all made sense now. They weren't just gossiping. They were observing the unraveling of my life, a silent, complicit audience to their elaborate fraud. My story was becoming one of those chilling audio stories you hear about, where the victim is isolated and gaslight. I remembered a conversation with Reverend Jenkins from our church. He'd recently asked me, with a strange hesitancy, if Robert had been experiencing financial difficulties. I'd brushed it off, of course, denying it immediately. Now, I knew Reverend Jenkins wasn't just making small talk. He was sounding me out, perhaps having heard rumors, perhaps even having been approached by Robert or Martha for some kind of assistance that would lend legitimacy to their schemes. The thought of my own church, a place of sanctuary, being drawn into their web, sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just a Reddit revenge story. This was hitting at the very core of my community, my faith. The conspiracy was deepening, stretching its tendrils into every corner of my life. I recalled a casual conversation at a community potluck, where a distant relative of Robert's had commented, "Oh, so Robert's finally taking over all the family investments, is he?" I had smiled politely, assuming they meant his own family's money. But now the context shifted horrifyingly. They weren't just talking about Robert's money. They were talking about my money, my inheritance, my future. It was a cold, calculated takeover, a slow-motion robbery. The bitter truth of these family revenge stories was now my own reality. The sheer scale of their deceit, the years they had spent meticulously planning this, made me feel a wave of nausea. They hadn't just targeted my wealth. They had targeted my identity, my sense of security, my very trust in the world. It wasn't a sudden act of malice, but a prolonged, agonizing campaign. The realization that those closest to me, my husband and his sister, had been planning my financial ruin was a gut punch. This was more than just relationship stories gone wrong. It was a complete shattering of the foundation of trust. I started to notice details that had previously seemed unimportant. The sudden generosity of Martha, offering to pay for a vacation I didn't even want, insisting on handling the bookings and expenses. I now suspected it was a way to keep me busy, distracted, while they moved their pieces on the board. The expensive gifts Robert would buy me, always slightly over the top, now felt less like affection and more like elaborate diversions, shiny objects meant to keep my eyes off the real prize they were stealing. Every thoughtful gesture, every kind word, was now tainted with the bitter taste of manipulation. This was not a sweet revenge short story by any stretch. It was a narrative of profound betrayal. The sense of isolation grew, even as my resolve solidified. Who could I trust? Who else was in on it, or at least aware and choosing to look the other way? The image of the underestimated grandmother, who baked pies and tended her garden, was a powerful disguise. They had seen my gentle nature as weakness, my trusting heart as an easy mark. They had underestimated the quiet strength forged in generations of Black women, who had to fight for every scrap of dignity and survival. They had no idea the fire that lay dormant beneath the surface, the fierce protective instinct for what was rightfully mine. This was about to become the ultimate grandmother takes revenge story time. The dread, which had once been a dull ache, now sharpened into a fierce determination. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to stand by and watch them dismantle my life, steal my legacy. The years of being dismissed, of being underestimated, of being seen as just Eleanor, were over. The quiet, gentle grandmother was gone. In her place was a woman forged in fire, armed with knowledge and ready to fight. This wasn't about reclaiming money. It was about reclaiming my very soul. This was the moment I decided I was done staying silent. The silence was their weapon. My voice would be my shield and my sword. The true fight was about to begin, and it would be an emotional video of raw power and undeniable justice. The path ahead was daunting, but clarity was a powerful tool. I knew their game. Now I just had to figure out how to play it better, how to beat them at their own insidious schemes. My goal was not just to expose their deceit, but to dismantle their entire operation, to ensure that no one else fell victim to their calculating charm. This was my true story, moral stories, lessons learned through bitter experience, and I intended to share them, not just with the people watching this, but with anyone who had ever been underestimated. The time for whispering was over. It was time for a roar. The weight of their betrayal, the sheer scale of the deceit, finally caught up to me. It wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow, agonizing crumble, like an old building collapsing piece by piece. The initial fury that had propelled me through the restaurant confrontation and the subsequent digging began to drain away, leaving behind a profound emptiness. I found myself staring at the walls of my beautiful home, the one my mama had left me, the one Robert and Martha were trying to steal. These walls, which once held decades of laughter and cherished memories, now felt like the cold, hard boundaries of a prison. Every object, every photograph whispered tales of a life I thought was real, but now felt like a cruel illusion. My financial world, which Robert had always managed, was exposed as a wasteland. My savings, the modest nest egg I'd built through years of careful living and hard work, was gone. Just a few $1,000s remained in my personal account, barely enough to cover the bills for a month or two. The house, my sanctuary, my inheritance, was riddled with secret debts, used as collateral for Robert's shadowy deals. I saw the legal documents Maya had uncovered, the bold signatures that weren't mine, the property lines being blurred, the equity vanishing into thin air. The stress of it all began to manifest physically, twisting my stomach into knots and stealing my breath. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by long, agonizing nights filled with racing thoughts and gnawing anxiety. My appetite vanished, and the vibrant color seemed to drain from my face. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the gaunt, tired woman staring back. The vibrant, capable Eleanor was gone, replaced by a ghost. I felt hollowed out, a mere shell of myself, adrift in a sea of despair. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, the weight of the blankets feeling like a concrete slab. The tears came unbidden, hot and stinging, burning trails down my cheeks. I questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, the very essence of who I was. How could I have been so blind? So naive? Had I somehow deserved this profound humiliation? The shame burned, a deep internal fire that felt impossible to extinguish. I, Eleanor Vance, a strong black woman, a grandmother, a survivor of so much already, felt utterly broken. In those moments I truly believed I had lost everything: my home, my financial security, and perhaps most painfully, my trust in the person I had shared my life with. The world outside seemed to spin on, oblivious to my silent agony, to the wreckage of a life built on sand. Friends called, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I isolated myself, not wanting anyone to see the shattered fragments of the woman I once was. I felt a desperate need to hide, to disappear, to shield myself from the sympathetic glances or worse, the knowing pity. This was a survival story reaching its lowest point, where hope felt like a cruel joke. The pain was relentless. It wasn't just the betrayal from Robert, or the shocking revelation about Martha. It was the crushing weight of having my entire reality ripped apart, of realizing that the man I had loved and trusted had been systematically dismantling my life while smiling in my face. The depth of that deceit was like a poison, spreading through my veins, making me question every single memory, every shared laugh, every tender moment we'd ever had. Was it all a lie? Was I just a pawn in his elaborate game from the very beginning? These were the ugly truths that surface in real infidelity stories and betrayal stories, stripping away every illusion. In the midst of this overwhelming despair, when hope felt like a cruel joke, a tiny flicker, almost imperceptible, began to stir within me. It was in the quiet hours of the night, when the house was silent except for the frantic beat of my own heart, that I remembered something. Tucked away in my mama's cedar chest, a place of comfort and hidden treasures, was an old leather-bound journal. It wasn't just any journal. It was my grandmother, Nana Rose's diary. I pulled it out, its pages brittle with age, the scent of lavender and old paper filling the air. I traced the elegant script of her hand, the words fading but still clear. Her entries weren't grand pronouncements, but quiet, profound reflections on hardship and perseverance. She wrote about the struggles of raising children during the Great Depression, about losing loved ones, about facing prejudice with dignity. "Dignity ain't given, child," she'd written in one entry, her words a balm to my raw spirit. "It's taken, earned and defended, sometimes with nothing but your spirit." Her words were a lifeline, a whisper from the past, reminding me that the women in my family had faced impossible odds and found a way to not just survive, but to thrive. This wasn't just my true story of resilience. It was part of a much larger, ancestral one. And then there was Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, a quiet woman with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the world. She had seen my drawn face, the curtains of my home drawn tightly for days. Without a word, she appeared at my back door with a plate of homemade biscuits, still warm, wrapped in a linen cloth. She didn't ask questions. She just sat with me at my kitchen table, her silent presence a profound comfort. She knew. She didn't need words. Her unspoken empathy was a gentle reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this desolate landscape. It was a small act, a simple gesture, but it was a lifeline, a tiny crack through which a sliver of light could enter. I also began to write in my own journal. A new one, a blank slate that slowly filled with my swirling thoughts, my raw emotions, my fragmented memories. It became a sacred space, a place where I could unburden my soul without judgment. I wrote about the humiliation, the anger, the moments of despair, and the gradual awakening of my fighting spirit. Each word was a step towards reclaiming myself, towards understanding that this painful chapter was not the end of my story, but a brutal, necessary turning point. It was here in these pages that I began to articulate my cheating revenge plan, not out of malice, but out of a fierce demand for justice. My lowest point was a deep, dark well, but those tiny acts of defiance, Nana Rose's journal, Mrs. Henderson's biscuits, my own furious writing were like small handholds, allowing me to begin the slow, arduous climb out. I looked at the little photo of my grandchildren on the kitchen counter, their bright, innocent faces a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped me. They deserved to know their grandmother was a fighter, not a victim. They deserved to grow up in a world where justice mattered, where integrity eventually triumphed. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about leaving them a legacy of strength, a real life story of courage. The bitterness I felt towards Robert and Martha began to transform. It wasn't a burning rage anymore, but a cold, clear focus. I saw their actions not just as personal attacks, but as a systematic attempt to exploit and disenfranchise. And that realization gave me a new purpose. This wasn't just about getting my house back or recovering my money. It was about exposing the rot, about standing up for myself and for anyone else they might have wronged, or would wrong in the future. My voice, which had been stifled for so long, was slowly but surely beginning to roar. This was quickly turning into one of those powerful, heartwarming stories, a phoenix rising from the ashes. I was Eleanor Vance. I was still here, and I was not going to let them erase me. Not now, not ever. The pain had been immense, the despair suffocating, but it had also been a crucible, burning away the illusions and leaving behind something stronger, something unbreakable. The quiet, gentle grandmother was still there, but now she had a spine of steel and a will of iron. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but I knew with a certainty that resonated deep in my soul that I would find my way through it. This was the raw, unfiltered truth behind my audio stories, moments of despair giving way to fierce resolve. If you've ever had to rebuild from ashes, if you've ever felt like your world crumbled around you, like every foundation you trusted betrayed you, stick with me. This is where the story truly begins. This is where a quiet woman, pushed to the very brink, finds a strength she never knew she possessed. This is my Reddit revenge story, my family revenge story, a testament to the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to stay broken. This is not just a tale of loss, but of profound reclamation. The journal Nana Rose's words became my guiding star through those dark, lonely nights. Her stories of quiet defiance, of making a way out of no way, ignited a fire within me that despair couldn't extinguish. My mind, once clouded by hurt, sharpened with a fierce new clarity. I was no longer just hurting. I was observing, analyzing, connecting the dots with a relentless precision I didn't know I possessed. Every conversation, every document, every memory now had a place in the larger, horrifying puzzle. And that's when the most shocking truth unveiled itself. A truth that twisted the knife in my gut even further, revealing a layer of betrayal I hadn't even imagined. This wasn't just Robert's doing. It was a deeper, colder malice at play, making it a truly twisted, true story of resilience. The true mastermind behind my suffering wasn't Robert alone. It was his seemingly timid, sickly sister Martha. Martha, who always played the victim, who I'd always pitied and even helped financially over the years. Martha, who had just inherited a significant sum from a distant relative, a sum I later realized was tied to the very properties Robert was trying to illegally claim. She had been the puppet master, pulling Robert's strings, whispering poison in his ear, convincing him that I was the obstacle, the foolish wife standing in the way of their shared fortune. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. A betrayal so profound it defied understanding. This was a survival story that now included confronting a wolf in sheep's clothing, a quiet menace hidden behind a facade of weakness. It was a cold, hard blow, a betrayal so deep it defied understanding. But in that shock, a strange sense of focus emerged. I had gravely underestimated Martha's cunning, her quiet malevolence, shielded by her frail appearance and her seemingly constant need for help. She always had a cough, a sniffle, a delicate condition that made everyone pity her. But she had gravely underestimated me. The universe, in its own mysterious way, began to send me unexpected allies, almost as if the scales of justice were subtly tipping in my favor. This wasn't just one of those ordinary infidelity stories or betrayal stories. This was a calculated, long-term plot, and Martha was at its very dark heart. My granddaughter Maya, a sharp, quick-witted young woman studying law at a good university, noticed my distress. She didn't press, didn't demand answers, but her bright, intelligent eyes saw more than I thought. She started asking subtle questions, not just about my health, but about the vague comments she'd overheard about the house, about my financial comfort. Her innocent inquiries, fueled by genuine concern and a lawyer's keen mind for detail, led her to uncover discrepancies, tiny details in online public records that, when pieced together, formed an undeniable pattern of fraud. Maya's questions, gentle at first, soon became precise, cutting through the fog of my pain to reveal the stark, ugly truth. She became my first true unexpected ally, a young warrior ready to fight for her grandmother, making this a true cheating revenge tale. Then there was Mr. Jenkins, the old postman, a fixture in our neighborhood for decades. He had seen Martha and Robert having hushed, intense conversations outside my house on multiple occasions, often late in the evening. He just thought it was odd at the time, maybe just family business. But when Miss Green from the newspaper started asking questions around the neighborhood, Mr. Jenkins, a man of quiet integrity, shared his observations. He remembered Martha's car parked strangely, conversation stopping abruptly when he approached. These small, seemingly insignificant details, when combined with Maya's findings, painted a damning picture of their collusion. This wasn't just a real-life story of personal suffering. It was a community waking up to hidden evil. I wasn't just a survivor anymore, I was a strategist. The raw, trembling rage I'd felt before was replaced by a cool, precise determination, a calm focus that felt almost chilling. I wasn't seeking revenge out of raw emotion or blind fury, but out of a clear understanding of justice, a demand for accountability. I saw their faces, Martha's sickly sweet smile, Robert's charming facade. I saw them for what they were. Not just greedy individuals but predators preying on trust, on family bonds, on an innocent woman. And I, Eleanor Vance, was no longer their prey. I was the hunter. This was fast becoming one of those powerful, heartwarming stories. A quiet woman's journey from victim to victor. I began to organize my thoughts, gather every piece of evidence, document every single discrepancy Maya found. We built a timeline, a clear, undeniable narrative of their deceit. Maya helped me navigate the complex legal labyrinth. Her fierce intelligence and unwavering support a profound comfort and a powerful weapon. She translated legal jargon into simple terms, explained every step, empowering me with knowledge. This wasn't just about getting my house back or recovering my stolen money. It was about exposing the rot, cleaning the corruption, and reclaiming my rightful place, not just in my home, but in my own life. My journey of healing had begun, truly becoming one of those compelling audio stories that captivate listeners. The weight lifted, replaced by a strange sense of purpose. Knowing that Martha was the true puppet master gave me an oddly satisfying target. Her feigned weakness, her years of accepting my kindness while secretly plotting against me, fueled a cold fire. It was more than just Robert's betrayal. It was the ultimate treachery from a person I had genuinely cared for, a relative who had sat at my table, shared my bread. This made my fight even more personal, more urgent. My fight was not just for myself, but to ensure that her particular brand of insidious evil would be exposed, serving as a powerful message in the Reddit revenge stories and family revenge stories of our time. I spent hours poring over documents, my glasses perched on my nose, a magnifying glass in hand. I found old receipts, hidden bank account numbers, encrypted emails, Maya's doing, of course. Each discovery was like unearthing a buried treasure, but a treasure that brought me closer to justice. I felt like a detective in my own life, meticulously piecing together the fragments of a crime committed against me by the very people who were supposed to be my family. The intellectual challenge of it, the satisfaction of uncovering their lies, became a source of unexpected strength. This was becoming more than just personal. It was a quest for truth, a profound part of my relationship stories with self and others. This was the moment I stopped asking why me, and started asking, what next? The despair was replaced by a quiet, simmering determination. I was no longer the quiet grandmother who baked pies. I was a force to be reckoned with. A storm was brewing, and Martha and Robert, in their arrogance, had no idea what was coming. I envisioned their faces, the moment the truth would finally hit them, the moment their carefully constructed world of lies would crumble. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, not in a petty sense. It was about balance, about setting things right, about a righteous retribution. This was the true essence of a grandma revenge story, evolving beyond simple payback. I knew this journey would be long and arduous, filled with legal battles and emotional confrontations. But I was ready. I had found unexpected allies in Maya and Mr. Jenkins, and even in Ms. Green from the newspaper, who, through her quiet inquiries, was already setting the stage for public awareness. The community, once a passive audience, would soon become active participants, witnesses to the unraveling of dark secrets. My story was no longer confined to the four walls of my home. It was about to become a public reckoning, a powerful, sweet revenge short story that would be whispered about for years to come. I looked at a photo of Nana Rose on my mantelpiece, her eyes strong and knowing. I felt her presence, a warmth in my heart, a gentle reminder that resilience ran deep in my blood. She had faced her own battles, and she had always emerged stronger. Her spirit infused me with courage, pushing me forward, reminding me that I was part of a lineage of survivors. This wasn't just my fight. It was a continuation of her legacy. A powerful grandmother takes revenge storytime passed down through generations. The decision was bold, clear, and unwavering. I was no longer the victim. I was the protagonist of my own narrative, taking back control one strategic step at a time. The quiet, underestimated Black American grandmother was gone. In her place stood a woman of power, ready to reclaim her dignity, her inheritance, and her peace. The stage was set for justice, for truth, for the powerful voiceover true story with a twist that would soon shake my community. The shift was palpable, not just in my spirit, but in the very air around me. The quiet despair had been replaced by a focused, burning determination. Robert and Martha, in their arrogance, had woken a sleeping giant, and now, the first tremors of my reckoning were beginning to shake their carefully constructed world. This wasn't just about proving their guilt. It was about reclaiming every piece of myself they had tried to steal, about showing them the unwavering strength of a Black American grandmother they had foolishly underestimated. This was the true beginning of my survival story. Our first move was precise, calculated. Maya, with her sharp legal mind, drafted a letter not directly accusing them, but simply requesting comprehensive documentation of all financial transactions related to my inherited property and joint accounts over the past 5 years. It was a formal, polite letter from a legitimate law firm, but the subtext was clear. The game had changed. Robert, true to his nature, initially tried to charm his way out of it. He called, his voice oozing false concern, asking if everything was all right, dearest, implying I was just confused or upset. But Maya, coached by me, was firm, polite, and unyielding. Each of his attempts to deflect or delay was met with a calm legal demand. He quickly realized this wasn't just a concerned wife anymore. It was a woman backed by legal muscle, turning this into a high-stakes betrayal story. Then came the subtle yet powerful public exposure. Mr. Jenkins, the old postman, had a quiet conversation with Ms. Green, the editor of the local community newspaper. He didn't offer wild accusations, just facts. Strange late-night visits, hushed conversations, my sudden withdrawn state. Ms. Green, a stern but fair woman with a nose for truth, began her own discreet inquiries. She started asking around, not directly about Robert or Martha, but about unusual property dealings in our neighborhood, about changes in community trust funds. She was laying the groundwork, allowing the rumors to spread naturally, like a slow-burning fuse. This wasn't about cheap gossip. It was about public awareness, a real-life story slowly coming to light. The first hint of trouble for Robert appeared subtly in the newspaper's community section. A small, seemingly innocent article discussing the importance of due diligence in personal finances and property inheritance. It didn't mention names, but it contained just enough detail for those in the know to connect the dots. The community, always watching, always talking, began to whisper. Robert's reputation, built on years of carefully crafted charm and generosity, began to crack. I saw it at church, at the grocery store. People who once flocked to him now kept a respectful distance, their smiles tight, their eyes holding a new cautious look. This silent judgment, the erosion of his carefully cultivated image, was a powerful social consequence, a chilling, cheating revenge unfolding in plain sight. His business associates, men who valued appearances and reputation above all else, started to distance themselves. Calls went unreturned. Meetings were suddenly postponed. Robert, who thrived on being at the center of attention, found himself subtly sidelined. He tried to laugh it off, making jokes about nervous Nellies and people getting the wrong idea. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands when he thought I wasn't looking. He was losing control not just of his scheme but of his standing, his very identity. This was my sweet revenge short story coming to life. Not with violence, but with surgical precision. Martha, meanwhile, began to unravel under the pressure. Her illness seemed to worsen dramatically, but I saw through it. Her trembling hands, her darting eyes, her sudden bouts of fatigue were not just physical ailments. They were manifestations of her terror. She knew we were closing in. She knew her days of hidden manipulation were numbered. I heard through the grapevine that she was canceling appointments, avoiding phone calls, becoming a recluse. The power she once wielded in the shadows was now a suffocating burden, a chilling karmic response to her actions. This was a grandmother takes revenge storytime that involved patience, strategy, and unyielding resolve. Our next move was calculated to hit Robert where it hurt most. His public image and his pride. He had a large annual charity gala coming up, an event he used to burnish his reputation as a benevolent pillar of the community. With Maya's help, we meticulously compiled irrefutable evidence of his financial misconduct. Bank statements showing the diversion of funds, forged signatures on loan documents, and compelling evidence of the altered will. We didn't release it all at once, that would be too loud. Instead, we fed it strategically. A discreetly placed tip to a few key, powerful donors who valued transparency. A quiet word to a journalist known for exposing hypocrisy, not just Ms. Green. The whispers grew louder, morphing into murmurs, then outright questions. This was the raw material for compelling audio stories that would soon shake the foundations of our town. The day of the gala arrived, thick with tension. Robert, usually so confident, so radiating charm, looked pale and strained. His eyes darted around the ballroom, searching for friendly faces, but finding only cautious stares, polite nods that held no warmth. He saw the cold, knowing looks from people he considered his allies, influential figures who now viewed him with suspicion. He saw his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble, brick by painful brick. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the weight of impending exposure. For the first time, Robert looked genuinely afraid, his swagger gone, his confidence replaced by a desperate, trapped look in his eyes. He knew. He finally knew the jig was up. This was the chilling unfolding of karma stories. The climax of the evening, for me, wasn't a shouting match. It was a moment of quiet satisfaction. As Robert stepped onto the stage to give his heartfelt speech about charity, a discreetly placed screen behind him, meant for a presentation, suddenly flickered. A single, damning document appeared for just a few seconds. A redacted bank statement, showing a massive, unauthorized transfer of funds from a joint account, dated just weeks before the will was changed. It was subtle, barely noticeable to the casual observer, but to those who knew, to those who were already suspicious, it was a blinding flash of truth. Robert froze mid-sentence, his eyes widening in horror as he saw the screen. The room buzzed, a low hum of shocked realization spreading like wildfire. He stammered, lost his place, and ended his speech abruptly, his usual smooth delivery replaced by nervous fumbling. He tried to dismiss the screen glitch as a technical issue. But the damage was done. The air had shifted. The illusion was shattered. The respect he commanded had evaporated, replaced by a tangible sense of distrust and disgust. He saw me then across the room standing quietly with Maya, a small, knowing smile on my face. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw his true fear. It was not just about the money anymore. It was about his legacy, his pride, his very identity as a good man being stripped away in front of his peers. This was the brutal truth of many relationship stories and marriage stories where deceit festers. He made his excuses and retreated from the stage, his usual charisma completely gone. I watched him go, not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of justice. This was not revenge born of petty spite, but a reclaiming of dignity, a systematic dismantling of a corrupt enterprise. He had sown the seeds of deceit, and now he was reaping the bitter harvest. Martha, who was also at the gala, tried to slip out unnoticed, her face a sickly green. But too many eyes were on her. Too many whispers following her retreat. Their carefully constructed world of lies was crumbling, and they were powerless to stop it. This was the painful but necessary lesson learned, playing out for all to see. The financial consequences for Robert were swift. His business partners, already wary, pulled out their investments. The loans he had taken out against the house, now under legal scrutiny thanks to Maya, came crashing down. The public humiliation, the social shame was an undeniable weight, far heavier than any jail sentence could be. He was losing everything he had valued. His money, his reputation, his false sense of power. And he knew in that moment that it was all because of the quiet woman he had tried to poison and discard. He looked over at me one last time before slipping out of the ballroom, and in his eyes I saw not anger but raw, unadulterated fear. He finally realized who he was truly dealing with. The predator had become the prey. The reckoning had truly begun. The air in the courtroom was thick, not with shouts, but with a tension so profound it hummed like a live wire. This wasn't the kind of dramatic showdown you see in movies, with angry outbursts and flung papers. This was far more chilling, far more real. This was the quiet, methodical unveiling of truth, piece by painstaking piece, in a setting where every word held immense weight. Robert sat at the defense table, his face a mask of carefully controlled fear, while Martha, pale and trembling, clung to her lawyer's arm. They thought they had seen the worst at the gala. They were wrong. This was the true final act, the ultimate true story of resilience culminating in a moment of undeniable justice. My voice, when I began to speak, was calm, steady and clear, carrying effortlessly through the hushed courtroom. I wasn't testifying with rage. I was simply laying bare the facts, years of suppressed pain channeled into an unwavering narrative. I spoke of the whispered warning in the restaurant, of the drugged drink, and how that one moment had ripped open a lifetime of carefully constructed lies. I described how Robert had slowly, subtly taken control of our finances, how he had dismissed my concerns, always calling me too worried, too naive. I painted a picture of a devoted wife, unknowingly living in a gilded cage, her independence slowly eroded. This was the raw, unvarnished truth of a survival story, told by the one who lived it. As I spoke, Maya, my brilliant granddaughter, sat by my side, not as a prosecuting attorney, but as my legal counsel and unwavering support. She presented the evidence. The doctored will, the fraudulent loan documents tied to Mama's house, the bank statements showing massive, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts. Each document, displayed on a large screen for all to see, was another nail in Robert's carefully constructed coffin. His lawyer, a well-known city attorney, tried to object, to paint me as a bitter, vengeful woman. But my calm demeanor, my simple, unadorned truth, cut through his theatrics. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restitution. About exposing the deep infidelity stories and betrayal stories that had festered for years. Then came the moment that truly shattered their composure. Maya played a series of short audio stories, snippets of recorded phone calls. The first was Robert's voice discussing securing the property with an unidentified person, hinting at Eleanor's reluctance. The second was Martha's voice, hushed but clear, saying, "She won't suspect a thing, Robert. She trusts us completely." And then the most damning, Robert and Martha discussing the changes to my will, and Robert's chilling line, "Just make sure she's compliant on the anniversary night." The air left the courtroom like a deflating balloon. The evidence of their direct collusion, their cold, calculated planning, was undeniable. Robert's face went white, while Martha began to visibly tremble, her carefully maintained composure crumbling into frantic gasps. This was a direct, irrefutable strike, a powerful moment in my cheating revenge. Their lawyers, clearly unprepared for the depth of our evidence, began to look visibly uncomfortable. Robert's lawyer stammered, attempting to claim the recordings were out of context. But the judge, a stern woman with piercing eyes, swiftly shut him down. The impact of hearing their own voices, their own conniving words, was a blow from which they could not recover. This wasn't just my word against theirs. It was their own words condemning them. This was the painful public reality of a real-life story unfolding in harsh daylight. I continued, my voice steady, detailing the systematic financial collapse they had orchestrated. I spoke of the lost savings, the liens on Mama's house, the years of quiet sacrifice I had made while they were plotting my ruin. I didn't raise my voice, but the power behind my words, the raw emotion held tightly in check, made them resonate through the courtroom. I was not asking for pity. I was demanding justice. I was not a victim. I was a survivor speaking my truth. The story I was telling was far from one of those gentle, heartwarming stories. It was a testament to the bitter strength forged in the fires of betrayal. The prosecution, seeing the powerful effect of my testimony, followed up with their own meticulous presentation. They brought in financial experts who detailed the flow of money, the shell corporations, the fraudulent signatures. They showed how Robert and Martha had worked in concert, systematically draining assets, preparing to leave me with nothing. The picture they painted was not just of individual greed, but of a sophisticated, heartless scheme. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, relentlessly dismantling Robert's carefully crafted image. This was the slow, deliberate work of karma stories in action. Then it was Martha's turn to testify, and her performance was nothing short of pathetic. She tried to play the frail, sickly victim, feigning confusion, claiming she was not well enough to understand these complex matters. But the recordings had already exposed her as a cold, calculating participant. Under Maya's quiet but relentless cross-examination, Martha stumbled, contradicted herself, and finally broke. She dissolved into tears, not of remorse, but of desperate self-pity, whining about her own perceived hardships and how Robert had pressured her. But her tears rang hollow, a transparent attempt to escape accountability. The judge and everyone in the courtroom saw right through it. This was a grandmother takes revenge story time, and Martha was crumbling under the pressure. The judge called a recess, and as the courtroom began to stir, I saw Robert's eyes darting frantically. He was cornered, his usual charm completely useless in this stark, truthful environment. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, not with anger, but with a raw, desperate fear I had never seen before. It was the fear of a man who knew he had lost everything. A man who realized the game was truly over. In that moment I felt no joy, no triumph, just a profound sense of closure. The long, agonizing wait for justice was finally reaching its end. This was the moment his relationship stories with deceit and betrayal came crashing down. The final confrontation came not through words, but through the judgment of the court. The judge's verdict was clear, concise, and damning. Robert was found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Martha, though given a lighter sentence due to her age and health, was also found guilty of conspiracy and financial complicity. The stolen inheritance, the properties, the money, all were ordered to be returned to me. The justice was poetic, complete, and utterly satisfying. I watched as Robert was led away, his shoulders slumped, his face defeated. The powerful, charming man who had tried to erase me was now just a shell, stripped of his power, his pride, his very freedom. This was the chilling end of his dark family secret story. I walked out of that courtroom, not with a triumphant shout, but with a quiet dignity that resonated deep within my soul. Maya walked beside me, her hand resting gently on my arm, her bright eyes filled with pride. The media swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrusting towards us. Ms. Green, the newspaper editor, stood calmly, her smile one of quiet admiration. I didn't stop to give interviews, didn't gloat. I just walked one foot in front of the other, bathed in the warmth of a crisp, clear day. The weak woman had indeed dominated the room, not with force but with truth. I was stronger, yes, and if necessary I would be alone, but I was finally unequivocally free. The fight was over and I had won. The courtroom felt like a lifetime ago, a distant memory almost. Yet the echoes of that day still resonated deep within me. It's been 5 years since Robert was led away, 5 years since Martha's frail facade crumbled, and 5 years since I, Eleanor Vance, walked out of that courthouse not as a victim, but as a victor. The dust has settled, yes, but the landscape of my life has been completely reshaped, built on solid ground this time, not on the shifting sands of deceit. This isn't just a story about winning a legal battle. It's a true story of resilience, about rebuilding a soul. Robert served his time. I heard he tried to reach out once or twice after his release, through a mutual acquaintance, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say, no closure to be found in his words. The Robert the first knew or thought I knew ceased to exist for me the moment I picked up that undrugged glass. He became a cautionary tale, a painful but necessary lesson learned. I heard whispers that he was a shadow of his former self, his charm utterly gone, unable to rebuild the life he'd so carelessly destroyed. Justice, in this case, wasn't just about the law, it was about the crushing weight of his own actions. Martha, his sickly sweet accomplice, faded from public life. Her health, genuinely failing after the stress of the trial and exposure, became her prison. I heard she became a recluse, living out her days in isolation, consumed by regret and perhaps the bitter taste of her own deceit. There was no redemption arc for her, no grand forgiveness from me. Some might find that harsh, but some wounds simply run too deep to fully heal, and some betrayals leave scars that serve as vital reminders. This was the raw, unvarnished end of their dark family secret story. My life, on the other hand, blossomed in ways I never imagined. The house, my mama's house, is truly mine again. Free and clear, imbued with a newfound sense of peace and belonging. I spent months restoring it, not just fixing the physical damage from Robert's neglect, but infusing it with new life, painting rooms in vibrant colors, tending the garden with a joy I hadn't felt in years. Every nail hammered, every bush trimmed was an act of healing, a reclaiming of my space, my heritage. This house stands not just as a home, but as a monument to my survival story. Maya, my brilliant granddaughter, is now a thriving lawyer, specializing in elder protection and financial fraud. Her fire, her sharp mind, and her unwavering sense of justice were instrumental in my case, and now she dedicates her life to protecting others from similar predatory schemes. Together, we started a small foundation in Nana Rose's name, dedicated to helping vulnerable seniors understand their rights, identify warning signs, and protect their assets from exploitation. It's a quiet act of defiance, a way to ensure that no one else has to endure what I did. Our work is more than just legal aid. It's about empowering people, giving them a voice, making it a truly heartwarming story for countless families. The fight taught me so much. It taught me that kindness is not weakness, but allowing it to be exploited certainly is. It taught me that the quietest people often hold the deepest power, and that true strength isn't about being loud or forceful, but about being unwavering, steadfast in your truth. I learned that trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to fully mend, and that protecting your own peace is paramount, even if it means walking away from what you once thought was everything. These are the profound lessons learned that I now carry with me, sharing them with anyone who will listen, especially through our foundation's work. My story isn't unique, you know. It's echoed in the silent struggles of countless others, in the infidelity stories and betrayal stories that play out behind closed doors every single day. It's in the quiet anxieties of those who feel unheard, unseen, underestimated. That's why I agreed to share my journey, to transform my painful real-life story into audio stories and narrated life stories for others. Because if even one person hears my voice, hears my truth, and finds the courage to stand up for themselves, then every tear, every moment of despair, every fight will have been worth it. I often sit on my porch now in the evenings watching the sunset, a cup of herbal tea in my hand. The neighborhood is quiet, peaceful. Mrs. Henderson still brings me biscuits sometimes, a silent gesture of friendship that means more than words. Mr. Jenkins, the old postman, still waves as he passes, a knowing smile on his face. The community, once buzzing with gossip about the Eleanor Vance drama, now regards me with a quiet respect, a recognition of strength, not pity. My Reddit revenge story became a local legend, a testament to the power of one woman's unwavering will. Survival isn't just about making it through. It's about choosing your worth every single day. It's about standing tall when they try to make you stoop. It's about finding your voice when they try to silence you. It's about reclaiming your narrative, turning your pain into purpose. My journey from a quiet, underestimated grandmother to a powerful advocate for justice has been arduous, but it has also been deeply, profoundly fulfilling. This isn't a sweet revenge short story filled with malice. It's a story of transformation, of a spirit refined by fire. I am Eleanor Vance, a Black American grandmother, a survivor, a fighter, and now a beacon of hope for others. My grandmother takes revenge storytime isn't just about what was taken, but what was bravely, fiercely reclaimed. If you're a survivor, if you've had to fight for your peace, for your dignity, for your very soul, know this: your story matters too. Don't let anyone dim your light. Don't ever let anyone tell you who you are or what you're capable of. Your strength is your own. If you're a survivor, if you've had to fight for your peace, subscribe now. Your story matters too.